Welcome to Sunday School for our junior high students for Sunday, November 26, 2023. I do not own the rights to this music. Today's Bible basis is coming out of Exodus chapter 40, verses 16 through 30, verse 34, and then verse 38. The title of today's story, A Safe Space. When you hear the word sanctuary, what comes to mind? Do you see the space in your church where the choir sings and the preacher preaches? Sanctuary also refers to a place, usually a church, where fugitives from the law were allowed protection from being arrested. A sanctuary can also be land where endangered birds and animals are allowed to breed and live without fear of hunters. During the Civil Rights Movement, the church was a safe place for African Americans to be strengthened and emboldened to face the terror of Jim Crow, prejudice, and racism. Not only did the church serve as refuge, but it also gave its members a chance to participate in activities forbidden to them in general society. The church became a people's court, a credit union, and a community bulletin board. The church also showed its members their responsibility to be agents of change and affect political change in Black people. Black churches also served as community centers where people were allowed to gather for good times and fellowship as well. These churches were the heart of the community and became the brains and inspiration of the continued struggle for liberation. The Black churches always had a history of not only having a sanctuary for worship, but also being a sanctuary for the Black soul, heart, mind, body, and spirit. Comfortable even if it is bad for them. Pray for her to choose what is good for her over what feels good. The memory verse for today's lesson is Exodus chapter 40, verse 38. For the cloud of the Lord was upon the tabernacle by day, and fire was on it by night, in the sight of all the house of Israel throughout all their journeys. Our lesson scripture, Exodus chapter 40, verses 16 through 30, verse 34, and then verse 38. Thus did Moses according to all that the Lord commanded him, so did he. And it came to pass in the first month, in the second year, on the first day of the month, that the tabernacle was reared up. And Moses reared up the tabernacle, and fastened his sockets, and set up the boards thereof, and put in the bars thereof, and reared up his pillars. And he spread abroad the tent over the tabernacle, and put the covering of the tent above upon it, as the Lord commanded Moses. And he took and put the testimony into the ark, and set the staves on the ark, and put the mercy seat above upon the ark. And he brought the ark into the tabernacle, and set up the veil of the covering, and covered the ark of the testimony, as the Lord commanded Moses. And he put the table in the tent of the congregation, upon the side of the tabernacle northward, without the veil. And he set the bread in order upon it before the Lord, as the Lord had commanded Moses. And he put the candlestick in the tent of the congregation, over against the table on the side of the tabernacle southward. And he lighted the lamps before the Lord, as the Lord commanded Moses. And he put the golden altar in the tent of the congregation before the veil. And he burnt sweet incense thereon, as the Lord commanded Moses. And he set up the hanging at the door of the tabernacle. And he put the altar of burnt offering by the door of the tabernacle of the tent of the congregation, and offered upon it the burnt offering and the meat offering, as the Lord commanded Moses. And he set the laver between the tent of the congregation and the altar, and put water there to wash withal. Then a cloud covered the tent of the congregation, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. For the cloud of the Lord was upon the tabernacle by day, and fire was on it by night, in the sight of all the house of Israel throughout all their journeys. Beginning of the tabernacle. As the Israelites were headed for the promised land, God directed them to set up a tabernacle to remind them of his presence. It provided a familiar space where the Israelites could feel at home in God's glory before truly being settled. Building the tabernacle was a labor of love for the Israelites. They donated needed materials and labored together to build it. The people were strengthened by the presence of God. When they settled in Jerusalem, they built a permanent temple in their new home. How to honor the presence of God. 1. Know the temple glorifies God. Number 2. Thank God that you are his temple. And number 3. Live knowing that God is always present with you. Traveling light. In the midst of a difficult transition, people look for security and guidance. While the Israelites were on their way to the promised land, God instructed the people to create the tabernacle, a place where they could always find his presence and guidance. The Israelites needed a place to honor God while they were traveling to a new place. This tabernacle became a visible promise of what was to come. The Black church has always functioned as a safe place where we can be strengthened and celebrate our bonds to one another and to God. Thanksgiving traditions. Thanksgiving was this past Thursday. What are your family's traditions? What foods do you look forward to every year? Is there an order to your family gathering? Pay attention to what happens at your family celebrations and ask an elder about the seasons your family follows. Certain traditions. Be prepared to share with your class. The end. God bless you and thank you for joining me today.